The research vessel, Meridian's Edge, moved slowly through the empty darkness of space. Its metal hull gleamed under distant starlight as it searched for new worlds and strange life forms. The ship had been traveling for 3 months, far from any human colony, looking for something interesting in the cold void. Dr. Hannah Kim sat at her workstation, watching green lines move across her computer screen. She was the ship's expert on alien life, but so far this trip had been boring. Every day was the same. Scan empty space, find nothing, move to the next sector. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, and she rubbed her tired eyes. Then something changed. A weak signal appeared on her screen, so faint she almost missed it. The computer tried to lock onto it, but the signal kept fading in and out like a dying light bulb. Hannah leaned forward, her heart beating faster. This was different from anything she had seen before. "What is that?" she whispered to herself, typing commands into her computer. The signal was old, very old. It used radio frequencies that humans had stopped using hundreds of years ago. But there was something else about it that made her skin crawl. It contained human DNA patterns, biological signatures that should not exist in this empty part of space. The ship's AI computer, called Atlas, began working on the signal. Numbers and letters filled Hannah's screen as the AI tried to figure out where the signal came from. After 10 minutes, Atlas spoke in its calm, electronic voice. Signal source located. Distance, 47,000 kilometers. Object appears to be a derelict spacecraft of human origin. Hannah's eyes grew wide. A human ship out here in the middle of nowhere? That was impossible. No human colony existed within 50 light-years of their current position. She checked her readings again, but the numbers were clear. "Captain Lee, to the bridge, please," she called over the ship's communication system. Her voice shook slightly with excitement and fear. Captain Jun Lee arrived within minutes. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but his face looked serious as he studied Hannah's computer screen. Behind him came Navigator Park, a young man who knew more about space travel than anyone else on the ship. "Show me what you found," Captain Lee said quietly. Hannah pointed to her screen. "It's a distress beacon, Captain. Very old, maybe 800 years. The strange thing is, it's transmitting human biological data, blood types, DNA patterns, medical information. But there are no human settlements in this sector." Navigator Park looked at the signal data and went pale. "Captain, I think I know what this is. The frequency pattern, the age of the signal. This matches records from the old war archives." "What war archives?" Captain Lee asked. Park's voice was barely a whisper. "The synthesis wars, sir. 800 years ago. There were stories about ships that went missing during the final battles. Ships that were never found." Captain Lee was quiet for a long moment. Every human child learned about the synthesis wars in school, but most of the records were classified or lost. It was a dark time in human history, when desperate people did terrible things to survive against an enemy no one talked about anymore. "Atlas, run a full scan of that derelict ship," the captain ordered. "I want to know everything about it." The AI worked for several minutes. When it spoke again, its voice seemed different somehow, more careful. "Ship identification confirmed. Vessel, Nascentia Prometheus Unbound. Last registry, Human Defense Fleet Synthesis War Period. Official status, destroyed in battle, all hands lost." The bridge became completely silent. Everyone knew that name. The Prometheus Unbound was legendary, a ghost ship from humanity's darkest hour. It was supposed to have been destroyed 8 centuries ago, taking its secrets with it. "That's impossible," Navigator Park said. "The Prometheus Unbound was blown up at the Battle of Titan's Gate. There were witnesses." "Apparently not," Captain Lee said grimly. He stared at the readings on Hannah's screen. The derelict ship was huge, much larger than their research vessel. Its hull was covered in scars from weapon hits and meteor impacts. It had been drifting in space for 800 years, waiting for someone to find it. "Sir, we should report this to Earth Command," Park suggested. "Let them send a military ship to investigate." Captain Lee shook his head. "That would take months. The distress beacon is still active, which means someone or something is still alive on that ship. We can't leave them waiting." Dr. Kim checked her readings again. "Captain, The biological signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's on that ship, it's responding to our presence. Far away on the derelict vessel, ancient systems began to wake up. Lights that had been dark for centuries started to flicker. Deep inside the ship's core, something stirred in the darkness. The distress beacon had done its job. It had called for help, and help was finally coming. But some things are better left sleeping in the cold void of space. Captain Lee suited up in his space gear, alongside Chief Engineer Wu and Dr. Kim. The shuttle bay felt cold as they prepared to board the mysterious derelict ship. Through the small window, they could see the Prometheus Unbound floating in the darkness like a metal tomb. "Remember, stay together and keep your radios on," Captain Lee told his team. "We don't know what we'll find over there." The shuttle carried them across the empty space between the two ships. Up close, the Prometheus Unbound looked even more frightening. Its hull was black with age and covered in deep cuts from weapons and space rocks. Some sections were completely blown apart, open to the vacuum of space. "There," Chief Engineer Wu pointed to a large hole in the ship's side. "We can get in through that breach." They flew the shuttle into the opening and landed in what used to be a cargo bay. Their boots made no sound on the metal floor since there was no air to carry the noise. Emergency lights on their suits cut through the darkness, showing twisted metal and floating debris. Dr. Kim checked her scanner. No atmosphere, but the gravity system is still working somehow. That's strange for a ship this old. They moved deeper, into the derelict vessel, following corridors that had once been filled with life. Now they were tombs, littered with the remains of the crew who had died here centuries ago. But these weren't normal human bones. "Look at this." Dr. Kim knelt beside some strange fragments scattered on the floor. They were crystalline, almost like glass, but they pulsed with a faint blue light. "These aren't human remains," Wu examined the fragments with his engineering tools. "They're some kind of advanced material. The energy readings are off the charts, but the power source is almost dead." As they continued through the ship, they found more of the crystal fragments everywhere. Some were as small as coins, others as large as dinner plates. All of them had the same dying blue glow, like the last embers of a fire. "There was a battle here," Captain Lee said, looking at weapon marks on the walls. "But not between humans. Humans were fighting something else, something that left these crystals behind when it died." The ship's layout was confusing. Some areas looked normal, like regular spacecraft corridors and rooms, but other sections had been changed, modified with technology that didn't look human at all. Strange tubes ran along the walls, and some rooms contained equipment that none of them could identify. "The deeper we go, the stranger this gets," Wu muttered into his radio. "Some of this technology is more advanced than anything we have today." They reached the ship's central core after an hour of careful exploration. Here the modifications were most extreme. The walls were covered in a mix of human and alien technology, connected by cables and tubes that pulsed with dim energy. At the center of it all was a massive chamber, 20 feet tall and just as wide. "My God," Dr. Kim whispered, staring at the chamber. "What is that thing?" The chamber was made of the same crystalline material they had found throughout the ship, but this crystal was still very much alive. It hummed with power, and blue light flowed through it like liquid electricity. Inside the chamber, suspended in the glowing energy, was a human figure. "It's a man," Captain Lee said, moving closer. "But look at him." The figure inside was definitely human, but he had been changed in terrible ways. Wires and tubes connected to his body at dozens of points. His skin had a metallic sheen, and parts of his arms and chest had been replaced with mechanical devices. His eyes were closed, but even through the crystal walls they could see his chest rising and falling slowly. Dr. Kim pressed her scanner against the chamber. "He's alive, Captain. After all these centuries, he's still alive. But the readings I'm getting don't make sense. His heart rate is almost zero, his brain activity is minimal, but his body is producing energy signatures I've never seen before." A small display panel next to the chamber flickered to life as they approached. Ancient text scrolled across the screen in several languages, including English. Most of it was technical data they couldn't understand, but one line was clear. Subject. Designation: Project Lazarus Unit 7. Name: Kai. Status: Deep stasis, awaiting activation signal. Lazarus, Wu repeated. That's a resurrection program. They were trying to bring people back from the dead. Not back from the dead, Dr. Kim said, still studying her readings. They were trying to make people who couldn't die in the first place. Suddenly the chamber began to glow brighter. The humming sound grew louder, and the energy flowing through the crystal walls moved faster. The display panel showed new text. Activation sequence initiated. External contact detected. We need to get back to the ship, Captain Lee said urgently. Now. But it was too late. The chamber was fully awake now, responding to their presence after 800 years of silence. Inside the crystal walls, the figure's eyes opened, glowing with the same blue light as the energy around him. He looked directly at them through the transparent barrier, and they could see recognition in his inhuman gaze. The tomb ship had kept its secret guardian safe for centuries. Now something had disturbed his sleep, and he was beginning to remember why he had been created in the first place. The crystal chamber cracked open with a sound like breaking glass. Blue energy poured out like water, filling the room with strange light. The figure inside stepped forward slowly, his feet touching the metal floor for the first time in 800 years. Kai looked around the room with glowing eyes, trying to remember where he was. His body felt different, heavier somehow. Wires and tubes that had kept him alive pulled away from his skin, leaving small holes that closed by themselves within seconds. "Stay back," Captain Lee warned his team, but Dr. Kim stepped forward instead. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Can you understand me?" Kai turned to look at her. When he tried to speak, his voice came out wrong, filled with electronic sounds mixed with human words. "I remember pain. So much pain." His memories came back, in pieces, like a broken movie playing in his head. He remembered volunteering for something important. He remembered doctors and scientists working on his body, changing him, making him into something else. He remembered screaming. "What year is it?" Kai asked, his voice becoming more normal. "It's 2847, Dr. Kim replied. "You've been asleep for 800 years. Kai's face showed shock, then sadness, then something that looked like fear. 800 years. Then they're all dead. Everyone I knew, everyone I was supposed to protect." He walked to a broken window and looked out at the stars. His enhanced eyes could see things normal humans couldn't. Energy patterns, radiation, signatures, the basic structure of space itself. Everything looked wrong. "The war," he said suddenly. "What happened to the war? Did we win?" Captain Lee exchanged glances with his team. "What war?" "The synthesis wars ended centuries ago. Humanity won and expanded across the galaxy." Kai laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "No, you didn't win. You couldn't have won, not against them." He turned back to face the humans. "I am Project Lazarus Unit 7. I was created to fight the Vex Collective, and if I'm awake, that means they're coming back." Dr. Kim had never heard of the Vex Collective, but something about the name made her feel cold inside. "Who are the Vex?" Kai's body began to change as he remembered. His skin turned more metallic and lights appeared under the surface like glowing veins. "They came from beyond our galaxy, machines that think and learn and grow. They don't just kill, they harvest. They take apart entire worlds piece by piece and use the materials to build more of themselves." He walked over to a damaged computer terminal and placed his hand on it. Somehow the broken machine came back to life. Images appeared on the screen, pictures of geometric ships that hurt to look at, cities being dissolved into basic atoms, and something worse. "They don't just harvest planets," Kai continued. "They harvest life itself. Every living thing becomes part of their collective mind. Billions of voices, all screaming inside their machines forever." Chief Engineer Wu stared at the images with horror. "These things were real. Very real. Humanity fought them for 50 years and was losing badly. So we created the Lazarus Project, volunteers who let scientists change them into living weapons. We became part machine, part human, part something else entirely." Kai's hand passed through the computer terminal, like it wasn't there, then became solid again. "We could phase through matter, manipulate energy, interface directly with their technology. We were the only things that could hurt them." But the war ended, Captain Lee said. The history books say humanity won. The history books? Kai's eyes glowed brighter. We didn't win, we just made them go away for a while. The Vex don't give up. They adapt, they learn, they wait. And now, alarms began sounding throughout the derelict ship. Ancient systems that had been dormant for centuries suddenly came online. Warning lights flashed red as the ship's sensors detected something approaching from deep space. Dr. Kim looked at her scanner and went pale. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures incoming. Multiple contacts, very large. Kai nodded grimly. They felt me wake up. The Vex can sense Lazarus units across vast distances. They're coming to finish what they started 800 years ago. Through the broken hull of the Prometheus Unbound, they could see lights in the distance. But these weren't stars. They were ships, dozens of them, with geometric shapes that seemed to bend space around them. As they got closer, reality itself looked twisted near their hulls. Get to your ship, Kai told the humans urgently. Get everyone away from here as fast as you can. What about you? Dr. Kim asked. Kai's body was changing more rapidly now, becoming something that was barely human. Energy crackled around his hands, and his feet were floating inches above the floor. I'm going to do what I was made to do. I'm going to fight them. You're just one person against all those ships, Captain Lee protested. Kai smiled, but his face was no longer entirely human. I'm not a person anymore, Captain. I'm humanity's weapon, and it's time to remind the Vex why they should have stayed in the dark between galaxies. The first Vex ship entered sensor range, and the real battle was about to begin. The Vex ships came out of hyperspace like nightmares made real. Their hulls were perfect geometric shapes, triangles, hexagons, and forms that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around them, creating ripples in reality that made the stars look wrong. Captain Lee rushed back to the Meridian's edge with his team. All hands, battle stations, he shouted into his radio. Prepare for immediate departure. Dr. Kim stayed behind for a moment, watching Kai transform. His body was becoming something beyond human understanding. Metal and flesh merged together, energy flowed under his skin like liquid fire, and his eyes burned with blue light that seemed to see everything at once. Go, Kai told her without looking back. What happens next isn't meant for human eyes. The first Vex ship opened fire on the Prometheus Unbound. But this wasn't normal weapons fire. It was a beam that unmade matter at the atomic level. Where the beam touched the old ship's hull, metal simply ceased to exist, leaving perfectly smooth holes. Kai stepped into the vacuum of space without a suit. He should have died instantly, but instead he floated there like he belonged among the stars. His body had become something that could survive in the void, something that could fight the Vex on their own terms. The Meridian's edge fired its defensive weapons at the nearest Vex ship. Plasma bolts and laser beams struck the alien hull, but they did nothing. The Vex ship's surface simply absorbed the energy and used it to make itself stronger. Our weapons aren't working, Chief Engineer Wu reported from the bridge. Nothing's getting through their shields. More Vex ships appeared, surrounding the two human vessels. Their weapons began charging, reality warping around the energy collectors as they prepared to erase both ships from existence. That's when Kai attacked. He moved through space like a ghost, his body shifting between solid matter and pure energy. When he reached the first Vex ship, he placed his hands on its hull and somehow passed right through the metal. Inside the alien vessel, he found the ship's core, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with stolen life force. Kai's modified body interfaced directly with the Vex technology. For a moment, he could feel the collective consciousness of the machine race, billions of harvested minds screaming in digital agony. The sensation almost drove him insane, but his Lazarus modifications held his sanity together. He grabbed the ship's core and tore it apart with his bare hands. The Vex vessel shuddered and went dark, its perfect geometry collapsing into twisted metal. One down, Kai whispered, but there were dozens more ships surrounding them. The other Vex vessels adapted, quickly as they always did. Their hulls began generating new defensive fields, specifically designed to keep Lazarus units out. But Kai had 800 years of combat programming stored in his enhanced brain, and he remembered tricks the Vex had never seen. He became pure energy, a bolt of living lightning that jumped from ship to ship. Each time he struck a Vex vessel, its systems overloaded and failed. But the effort was killing him slowly. His body was breaking down under the massive energy expenditures. Dr. Kim watched from the Meridian's edge as Kai fought impossible odds. "He's destroying them, but it's tearing him apart," she reported to Captain Lee. "Can we help him somehow?" the captain asked. "No. Our technology is centuries behind his. We'd only get in his way." Kai destroyed 5 more Vex ships before they found a way to hurt him. One vessel fired a weapon that locked onto his energy signature and followed him as he phased through space. The beam caught him, and for the first time since awakening, he screamed in pain. The weapon was designed specifically to kill Lazarus units, something the Vex had developed during their long war with humanity. It disrupted the delicate balance between his organic and mechanical parts, causing his body to fight against itself. Kai fell toward the Prometheus Unbound, his form flickering between human and energy. When he landed on the derelict ship's hull, he was bleeding from wounds that glowed with unnatural light, but even wounded, he wasn't finished. He crawled to the ship's main power core and began to interface with it directly. The ancient fusion reactor had been dormant for centuries, but under Kai's touch it began to wake up. "What's he doing?" Wu asked, watching the power readings spike on his instruments. Dr. Kim understood first. "He's going to overload the reactor, create a chain reaction that will destroy everything in this area." "Including us?" "Including everything, Captain." Lee made a quick decision. All ships jump to hyperspace immediately, get as far away as possible. But even as the Meridian's edge prepared to flee, more Vex ships were arriving. Long-range sensors showed a massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace, hundreds of vessels, enough to harvest an entire solar system. Kai looked up at the approaching armada and smiled despite his pain. He had been created for this moment, to stand alone against impossible odds and buy humanity time to escape. 800 years, he whispered to himself. "I've been sleeping for 800 years, and they're still coming. But that's okay. I remember how to hurt them now." The reactor began to scream as he pushed it beyond all safety limits. The sky was dark with smoke. Alexander stood on the hill, watching his men march through the broken gates of the Persian city. They had won again, but this victory felt different. His soldiers were not cheering like before. "My lord," said Clytus, his old friend and general, "the men are tired. They want to go home." Alexander turned away. Home. Macedonia seemed like a dream from another life. He had been fighting for 8 years now. 8 years of blood and sand and strange lands. "We cannot stop now," Alexander said. "India waits for us. New lands, new glory." Clytus shook his head. "Glory for who? Half our men lie dead in foreign soil. The others miss their families." That night, Alexander held a feast for his generals. The wine flowed freely. Persian dancers moved between the tables. Alexander wore Persian robes now, gold and purple silk that caught the firelight. "Look at you," muttered Philotas, one of his oldest companions. "You dress like them now, you make us boo like Persian slaves." Alexander's face grew red. "I am trying to unite our peoples. Can you not see? One empire, one culture, one emperor." "Who thinks he is a god?" Philotas said louder now. The hall fell silent. Alexander stood slowly. "What did you say?" "You heard me. You are not the same man who crossed the Hellespont with us. That Alexander was Macedonian. That Alexander was our brother." Alexander threw his wine cup across the room. "Get out! All of you who doubt me, get out!" The generals left quietly. Only Hephaestion remained, Alexander's closest friend since childhood. "They are wrong," Hephaestion said softly. "You see further than they do." But Alexander was not listening. He stared at the map on the wall, covered in marks showing his conquests. So much land, but it was never enough. There was always one more city, one more kingdom. Days later, news came that Philotas was planning rebellion. Alexander had him arrested and executed. Then he ordered the death of Philotas's father, old Parmenion, who had served Alexander's father, Faithfully, the army watched in silence as their old general died. They began to whisper. Their king was changing. The Persian wine, the Persian clothes, the Persian ways. He was becoming what they had come to defeat. One night, drunk at another feast, Alexander argued with Clytus again. "You owe me everything," Alexander shouted. "I made you all rich." "I made you famous." "Your father made you," Clytus shouted back. "Without Philip's army, without Macedonian soldiers, you would be nothing." Alexander grabbed a spear from a guard. Before anyone could stop him, he threw it. Clytus fell, blood spreading across the floor. The hall was silent. Alexander dropped to his knees beside his friend. "Clytus! Clytus, no!" But it was too late. Clytus was dead, killed by the hand of the king he had saved in battle many times. Alexander locked himself in his room for 3 days, refusing food or water. When he finally came out, his eyes were hollow. He never spoke of Clytus again. The army marched onto India. They crossed rivers and mountains no Greek had seen before. They fought elephants and strange warriors. They won battle after battle, but each victory cost more than the last. At the river Hyphasis, the army stopped. The soldiers planted their spears in the ground and refused to go further. "Please," Alexander begged them. "Just a little more. The edge of the world is close, we can reach it." But they would not move. These men who had followed him across the known world finally said no. An old soldier stepped forward. "My king, I have served you since I was a boy. I have 3 wounds from your wars. My son died at Gaugamela. My brother at the Persian gates. How many more must we lose for your dream?" Alexander looked at the faces of his men. They were not the young warriors who had left Macedonia. They were scarred, tired, old before their time. "Very well," he said, at last. "We turn back." But turning back was not the same as going home. Alexander led them through the Gedrosian desert, a terrible choice that killed more men than any battle. Some said he did it to punish them for their refusal. In Babylon, Alexander fell sick. Some said it was poison, others said it was fever from his many wounds. As he lay dying, his generals asked who should inherit his empire. "To the strongest," he whispered. He died at 32, master of the largest empire the world had ever seen. But he died without an heir, without a home, without the friends who had started the journey with him. His empire broke apart almost immediately. His generals fought each other for pieces of what he had built. Within a generation, it was as if Alexander's great dream of one world had never existed at all. The price of his victory had been everything he once held dear.